I acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we stand and pay our respects to Indigenous elders past, present and emerging. 111 years ago, the Ottoman Empire set in motion a systematic campaign to eliminate the Armenian people. What followed was not the collateral of war. It was deliberate, organised and pursued with precision. Death marches into the desert, mass executions, the abduction of children into homes raised with names and beliefs that were not their own. Entire towns, entire families, entire generations gone. And yet the world did not act. The world watched. And then, for decades, much of the world looked away. We gather here this evening, as we do every year, not just to remember, because memory on its own is not enough. Memory without action becomes a monument to resignation. We gather here to bear witness, to speak, to demand, and to refuse silence. We say the word genocide deliberately. We say it precisely, not to provoke, but because precision matters when the alternative is euphemism. And euphemism has always served those who wish to forget. Our nation's leaders once again choose euphemism over truth. In 2026, on the anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, both the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition provided statements to the Armenian, Greek and Assyrian communities, but once again failed to call this crime by its name. The Prime Minister's statement about the Armenian commemoration looks like Ankara's liquid paper removed the only word that really matters, which should sit between Armenian and commemoration. The coalition statement describes what can only be called a genocide, but it is equally unacceptable and discredited by its careful avoidance of that single word. What is clear is that our nation's leaders cannot summon the courage to speak one word: genocide. The gag order from a foreign dictatorship remains in force. No amount of diplomacy, no alliance, no strategic interest can justify their refusal to confront historical truth. This is why we will not be crediting these statements by reading them out loud on a night that we honour those who were martyred 111 years ago. Their silence is not neutral. On this anniversary of the Armenian, Greek and Assyrian genocides, that silence echoes louder than any carefully constructed language ever could. Our genocide is not a disputed footnote. It's the foundational case in what happens when a state decides that people should cease to exist and the world finds reason to not intervene. That history does not only belong to Armenians, it belongs to all of humanity, because the question it asks is still unanswered. What are we willing to do when it happens again? That question is not rhetorical. It demands an answer. And the answer must be found not only in how we honour the past, but in how we respond to the present, because it has happened again. Artsakh was home to an indigenous Armenian population whose roots stretched back thousands of years. In September 2023, over 100,000 Armenians were dragged from their homes in an act that delivered sickening nostalgia to a community that has stood on this stage repeating, genocide denied is genocide repeated, and a crime encouraged is a crime encouraged. According to a 2024 Freedom House report, the actions carried out by Azerbaijan constituted ethnic cleansing, resulting in the forced exodus of Artsakh's entire indigenous population from their homeland. An entire people erased from their home in only a matter of days. The world watched. The world went quiet, and with speed, it moved on. But we have not. What happened in Artsakh did not occur in a vacuum. It occurred in the long shadow of 1915, made possible by the habit of looking away. The same willingness to place strategic interest over human life, the same failure to hold perpetrators to account until it is too late. When genocide goes unanswered, it does not end. In the aftermath of Artsakh's fall, Armenian political leaders were detained for their crimes, not for their crimes, but for who they are and what they represent. Men like Rupen Vardanyan, Bako Sahakyan, and David Ishkhanyan, leaders of a people now held behind closed doors, subjected to staged trials, and denied justice. But this is not new to us. One of the defining features of the Armenian genocide was the deliberate targeting of political leadership, those who could organize, those who could represent, and who could sustain a people. Destroy the leadership of a people and you destroy the people themselves. What we are witnessing today follows that exact same logic. This logic by people with the same motivating ideologies as the Ottoman leaders of modern-day Turkey, who committed the genocide we commemorate tonight. Then we have the destruction of sacred space. Across Western Armenia, the lands from which our grandparents and great-grandparents were driven, churches that have stood for thousands of years have been converted, demolished, or erased. Sanctuaries that have survived centuries of conquest have been stripped of their crosses, their altars, their Armenian script, their very identity. And that was then. That was history. That's what they say. But this week, as we prepare to gather, the Holy Mother of God Cathedral in Stepanakert was demolished, razed to the ground on the eve of the 111th anniversary of the Armenian genocide. This is not just the demolition of a church. This is the continuation of the same policy that led to the Armenian genocide over 100 years ago. A people's spiritual architecture is their memory made in stone. When you destroy a church, you're not destroying a building. You're saying you were never here. You are attempting the final act of genocide, not just the destruction of a people, but the destruction of any evidence that a people ever existed. This is cultural erasure. It's the continuation of 1915, and it must be named for what it is. In recent years, the borders of the Republic of Armenia itself have been violated. Villages have been seized, hillsides have been occupied, maps have been redrawn not through negotiation but through the creep of military force and then ratified by indifference. This is not a border dispute and this is not a misunderstanding between neighbours. When a neighbour takes your land inch by inch and the world responds with dialogue and de-escalation, what is being communicated to the aggressor is the cost of aggression is low. What is being communicated to the victim is that their sovereignty is conditional, that there are some peoples whose borders the international community will defend, and others who must simply just adapt to the new norm. We reject that argument. Armenia's territory is Armenian territory. Its borders must be recognised, respected, and defended under international law. The diaspora does not accept a peace that is merely the formalisation of conquest. And finally, the dream and the right of return. For over a century, Armenians have looked westward, towards Van, toward Ani, toward the homes that our people were driven from. For those who carry the memory of Western Armenia, the right of return remains a dream deferred, a dream that has never been formally acknowledged by the international community. But for the Armenians of Artsakh, this is not a dream. This is the question of historical reckoning. This is an urgent, living human right. The entire indigenous Armenian population of Artsakh watched their homes disappear before them. They are now scattered across Armenia and the diaspora, carrying with them the knowledge that they were removed because they did not choose to leave, but because they were made to. The right of return for Armenians of Artsakh is not a political aspiration. It is enshrined in international law. It is non-negotiable. And any peace settlement, any diplomatic process, any agreement that does not include a clear and enforceable right of return is not peace. I will not pretend that the path forward is clear. The challenges we face are real. The geopolitical dynamic today is formidable. The fatigue among our own people, among our allies, among those who have carried this cause for decades is real. What happened in Artsakh has shifted something in the global Armenian nation. There is a grief that has not been fully grieved. There is a wound that is still open. And some among us have felt for the first time in the long time the specific despair of watching something irreversible happen and not being able to do anything about it. I will not offer you false comfort. I will not tell you that justice moves inevitably towards the righteous. But I will tell you this: we are still here. The aim of the genocide in 1915 and in every act of erasure that has followed was to end our presence in history, to ensure that one day there would be no one left to remember, no one left to speak, no one left to demand. And yet here we are, gathered and unbroken. Every meeting in Canberra advocating for truth and recognition is an act of defiance. For those in the hallways of Parliament in our nation's capital or state capitals not willing to advance our truth, our recognition, our justice demands you be met with the defiance of a 50,000 strong Armenian community, as well as the many thousands of Assyrian and Greek Australians who fell victim to the same unblunted sword 111 years ago. Every effort to educate, to speak, to refuse silence is an act of defiance. And we see it all around us, even here tonight, in the poetry delivered, carrying memory of grief and truth through every word, in the school choirs who give our voice to history through song, in the dancers who keep our traditions alive with every step, in the language we continue to speak, in the stories we pass down, in the way we gather year after year to remember and to stand together. We carry the names of those who've passed. We carry language and recipes and songs from a geography that was stolen from us. And we carry forward, because to stop carrying forward would give the perpetrators the only thing they ever truly wanted. So yes, the challenge is real. The ground has shifted. The world is complicated and exhaustion is human. But we must keep going. For the hostages waiting in those cells, for the churches being erased, today while we stand here. The families in Armenia watching their fields disappear across a new border, for the 100,000 people of Artsakh who went to sleep in their homes and woke up with nothing the next day. For our grandparents who survived and those who did not. We remember, we demand, we persist. Because that, in the face of everything, is what it means to be Armenian. Thank you.